Good morning. Hey, for all the families, I'm so excited to be hanging out with you on Friday night. I thought it was so cool when they came to me and they said that Allie Mercer was going to be the credible host, because that makes me the incredible host, right? So I tell myself this gets me out of bed in the morning, Pete, right? I might get up, you are incredible, all right? Yeah, that's not what my wife always says, but that's what I always say. Hey, tomorrow is Monday. You know what Monday is? Monday is the one day of the week most likely to call in sick. Can you imagine that? Monday is the day that people are most likely to call in sick. Guess what the day of the week is that people are least likely to call in? Friday, right? You're recovering on Monday and you're living for Friday. You know, if you worked 45 years, so basically if you got a full-time job when you're around 22 and you maybe did that to 67, you worked 40 hours a week, do you know that you'd put in 90,000 hours in your lifetime of working? And who really works 40 hours? Right? We often work more than that. You're probably going to put in 100,000 hours of work in your lifetime. This is why you're tired, right? Some of you are ticking up around the 60 grand mark. That's what I'm thinking. Because God cares about your life. He cares about your work. You spend so much time doing work that God cares about that. So we thought we would like to do a series on work. Do you remember your first job that you got a paycheck for? Your name was on the check? Who remembers their first job? What was it? Woolworths. Oh, well, we're not going to talk about how long ago that was. All right. Another one. What? Allmax. Woo. Papa Gino's. I could never work at a pizza place. I just wouldn't leave. A couple more. Paper boy, that's right. Anyone else? Paper girl. Yeah. All right. What? Pizza Villa. All right. Well, that's a long time. Babysitting, dog walking. You didn't get those confused, right? All right. That's why they had a hard time keeping up. One last one. What? Books. Brooks Pharmacy. All right. Mine was landscaping at a baseball field as a teenager. I grew up in the city. It was the most grass I'd ever seen in my life, so I had no idea what to do with it. You know, mowing in a straight line became a skill that I had to develop. We're going to talk through all of this in the next couple of weeks about how to grow spiritually. We got a gift for you to help you do that. On the chairs are these little business cards. Now, you heard me say last week, we choose to grow spiritually. And spiritual maturity is a choice. So this is going to help you with that. What you can do as we talk through this message, because I believe that God is in this room speaking to you. A great insight that you got out of this morning or an action step you think to take, you write it on the card. And you keep it and you reflect on it, because spiritual maturity is a choice. And the things you do in this room will make an impact outside this room. But you have got to want to do that. We're equipping you. I said we'll give you all the resources you need. This is an opportunity for you to take a resource, pray about it, write something down, and follow up on it during the course of the week. So what I'm going to do about this morning, I'm going to talk about God's purpose for your life. I'm going to talk about sheep. And I'm going to talk about coffee at Christmas time. All right? In order to do that, I should pray. God, what an opportunity this morning. I think you love being in this room because to you, Father, these are your children. And this is a family gathering. You love this place because you love the people who gathered in this room. And we get to think about Jesus. We get to worship him. We get to lift him up. We get to make him famous with our lives. We get to live in such a way that we draw people to Jesus. And God, I want to pray that what happens in this room is a personal encounter with a living Jesus for people, that they could hear you speak into the depths of their heart and be surprised by what you say. What's most important to me, Father, is that we're not the same by the time the next 30 minutes is over. Please own the moment. I love you, Father, and I trust you. Amen. Work is not a curse. I want to repeat that. It doesn't have to be. Work is not a curse. Say this with me. Work is not a curse. Some of us need to say that 100 times. Actually, you were created to work. It's part of God's design and purpose for your life. I want to read something from the very beginning of our Bible. Okay, this comes at the climax of all of God's work of creation. When he says, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They'll reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and all the small animals that scurry along the ground. And so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. Two important points coming out of this little passage. The first one is that work is sacred. You were created in God's image. You know, this is the first time in the Bible that we get the understanding that God is a Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He talks about creating us in his image, and he uses the plural to describe that. This comes at the climax of his work of 6 days of creating. And his greatest work, the one that he is really pleased with, is you, the creation of human beings. That's important to God. And because we're created in God's image, when we work, we imitate our Father. So working is imitating our Heavenly Father. Working is sacred because God worked and he created us to be like him, which includes work. And work is significant. It's actually commissioned to us by God. When God says they'll reign over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, when humanity is created, he actually says, repeats this to them to go do this, be fruitful and multiply, spread, and then reign, rule. In that context, to the original people who read that, it's a context of stewardship. The idea that this belongs to someone else. And we've been assigned by this person to work as he would work in our place. Caring for the world, stewarding the natural resources, developing societies as he would have. We don't always do it well, we don't always do it right. But he's given us a mission, he's given us a business plan, we call it the Bible. And he's equipped us with all the resources we need in order to achieve the business plan. But work is a commission from God. So we were created to work. It's significant and it's both sacred. Now, a couple of points. Not every job is a good job. I mean, some companies actually do bad things. Whether it's services or products that are harmful to people or aren't good to people. And some jobs are really difficult places to work because the people in them are difficult. I'm not saying that every single job is a good job. I'm saying that your ability to work is a sacred and significant part of your creation. You may need a different job, but working is imitating God. And I know that not every job feels fulfilling. I get it. Some of us live for Friday and we die on Monday. It's why Monday's the most called in day of the week. Because people don't want to go to work. And I've done it. You know, I've been the paper boy. I delivered phone books. Right? I worked as a clerk in a stockroom of a retail store. And I counted inventory on the shelf. It did not feel significant as I did those things. At that point in my life, it felt mundane. I didn't look forward to going to work, and I looked forward to coming home. And I respect that. So what do we do when we can't find the sacred and the significant? When our lives don't feel significant in what we do at work? How do we align ourselves with God's plan for our lives so that our work can change? There's a couple of things I want to do. And by the way, when I say work, you know, anything that we say over the next 3 weeks as we go through this series can apply to any context, whether you work at home, whether you're a homemaker, whether you're doing chores, whether you're working on your homework. It doesn't matter. The points can apply whatever. We're just putting it in the context of a workplace. So here's a couple of things to do if you're not finding work to be very sacred and significant. This is going to sound unusual, so I'm going to say it, then I'm going to explain it so you can follow with me. Consider how your work actually illustrates your faith. Because there's an opportunity for you there. If you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, you'd be surprised at how you can find connections between what you're doing and your faith. I want to take a look at a man named David. He was the second king of Israel. We're going to use him kind of like as a story to tell over the next few weeks in relation to work. He's responsible. He was either the subject of a lot of the history in the Bible, or he's responsible for most of the Psalms in a book called the Psalms, the poems or songs that were written that people have used for spiritual reflection for a long time. We first meet David in the Bible when he's working the family business, tending sheep and goats. Right? It was an important job because people needed sheep for clothes, they needed the meat to eat, they used the milk to make cheese, and they used both goats and they used sheep in the sacrificial system. It was an important religious commodity. but it wasn't a highly respected job. It was dirty. I mean, you smell like sheep, right? You're living in the wilderness, and it tended to draw a rough crowd. It was really hard, because when you're working it, when you hear David talking about, there are times he had to face off against wild animals in the wilderness. It was really, when you're living in the wilderness, it was really lonely at times because you had to travel far, depending on the season, with the sheep, away from home, living outdoors the whole time, kind of like our modern concept of a cowboy. And it was really a mundane job at times, is taking care of sheep, because honestly, I have a friend who's raised sheep, and he said to me when he reads how God compares us to sheep, he's kind of insulted. He says, Mike, sheep are pretty stupid. They get themselves into trouble all the time. They can't meet their needs. They can't find good water. They start to eat wrong things. They wander away. They fall into ditches. They get hurt. He goes, you're constantly taking care of sheep. So here's the job. It's a job that's critical to society. It was really hard. It wasn't well respected. It was a dirty job, and somebody had to do it. David started off as a shepherd. Now, here's what's interesting about his life trajectory, because we know it from our history books. He would go from being a shepherd to being a mighty warrior, to being a respected commander, to being one of the great kings of the Bible. And yet, when he stopped at life, at a point in his life as an adult, he began to reflect on his relationship with God in the Psalms, because these Psalms are really beautiful. What these Psalms do is they reflect on the character of God, God's work in our world. They reflect on our human nature and our relationship with God. People all around the world for centuries have used the Psalms to really grow their relationship with God. When he stopped and he wrote one of the most famous Psalms in the Bible, it's one that we use at one of the worst moments of life. Psalm 23. It's a psalm known by its first few words, the Lord is my shepherd. And we use it often at funerals. We've used it when we visit people with terminal illness and people in the process of dying. We even heard a song this morning that we sang. It gave us a great lift of worship. Highlands was a reflection of Psalm 23 at a moment in the writer's life when he felt lonely, worn out, burnt out, and alone in the Scottish Highlands. So we use this psalm throughout our whole lives. And what's really amazing to me is that when David was reflecting on his relationship with God, the one career that he chose to best personify his relationship with God was the one that was least respected by the world around him. His first job became his most meaningful job to understand how God worked in his life. Because listen to how he talks about this. The Lord's my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I'll fear no evil. For you're with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. He's reflecting on his life as a shepherd. Probably the simplest time of his life. He's thinking about his relationship with God. He's thinking, as a shepherd, he thought of God as being the God who provides and guides and protects. Who's a God who provides by bringing them the sheep to find their sustenance for food and for water. And they always look for places where the grass was lush and the water was clear. He thinks about the time of guidance in life, of taking them through these places. Sometimes he'd take them to wonderful, beautiful pastures, and sometimes he had to guide them through really dark valleys that were dangerous with bandits or wild animals. And he had to protect the sheep, and the sheep trusted him. They found comfort in the presence of the shepherd. He talked about the protection as a shepherd. There was a moment when he faced off against this huge giant of a warrior. And the confidence he had is that when he was a shepherd, he had faced off against lions and bears. To protect the sheep, he put his life at risk. And then in life, he reflected back at that, and he thought of times when God provided for his needs. David had served for 17 years as an exile from his nation. Sometimes living in the wilderness, having to scurry to provide for his needs. And he found God providing for his needs in miraculous ways that he couldn't have anticipated. He thought of God as giving him guidance. When he was king and he had to guide a whole nation, you know who he turned to for his guidance? God. Trusting that as God led him, he could lead the people. Next, we're going to talk about one of the worst moments of his life, a great betrayal where his life was at risk, and it was God who saved him. And so, of course, David, reflecting on his life, thought, you know what? God is like my shepherd. And because of this relationship, David found refreshment for his soul. He found guidance through life's most difficult moments. He realized he didn't have to fear the evil that was around him. You can even find comfort in the midst of a difficult situation. And he did that by reflecting on his first job. Whatever you do, you can find a connection to your faith that actually illustrates your faith. Happens all the time. I think about this. Look at this passage. Forgive us our debts as we've forgiven our debtors. If you're an accountant, you understand debt. Sometimes you understand a lot of debt. If you're a financial counselor, you try to help people out of a lot of debt. And in those moments, you can stop and you can actually reflect in your own life and how God has canceled the debts of your sins. How those moments of betrayal, the things that you've done that you deeply regret, that just kind of like fill up on a tally sheet of your life, right? Because you're an accountant, you get it. But Jesus Christ canceled your debts. It gave you freedom. And you know what that freedom's like when you find people who have those rare moments when their debts are forgiven. Or this. Clearly, no one who relies on the law is justified before God because the righteous will live by faith. If you're a lawyer, you get guilty and innocent against the law. And you know how complicated the law is. And you've probably seen good people inadvertently do bad things. They didn't realize. Or you've seen some people do some really bad things, and they're absolutely guilty. But you all can also reflect on your own life and how God at work in your own life. You know that no matter how good I try to be, I never fit the standard. And the fear in the back of everyone's mind that whenever I've had an honest conversation with people is like, I just don't know if I'm good enough. How do I know if I'm good enough? Well, you know that the righteous live by faith, not by works. When we stand in the great courtroom of God's final judgment and we're there before the Father and he is the judge, and what we can know is that we can find a peace because we have trusted Jesus Christ, who will take on our own guilty verdict. And we can be declared innocent. If you've ever been in a courtroom with somebody when they've been declared innocent, you know how freeing that is. Or even if you work in a grocery store. This is awesome. Jesus calls himself the bread of life. You're walking through the bread aisle and you get an opportunity to, every time you walk down that aisle, you get to think, Jesus is the bread of my life, feeding my soul and the souls of others. That Jesus is the living water. When you walk down the aisle and you're just kind of like under it that day, you just glance at the water and you think, Jesus Christ is my living water. He gives me life. When you walk through the produce section, you get to see the beauty of the Creator and all that he does. When you're putting food into bags, you can think how you get to provide for others God's provision and be a part of that. It doesn't matter if you're a trainer or if you're a physician, if you're a contractor. No matter what you do, you can find these moments of connection between what you do and your faith that can give you a sense of this is a sacred thing to imitate God in the world around me. But you can also change the perspective by what you do. Here's some advice from Paul, one of our great leaders. He says, work willingly at whatever you do as though you're working for the Lord rather than people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward and that the master you're serving is Christ. When you choose to follow Jesus Christ, when you choose to trust him with your life, you get adopted by God and you're made a part of the family business. And God runs the biggest temp agency in the world. When you're a part of God's family, you're a part of God's business. And God now tempts you out to whatever it is that you're working. And you're representing him. The beautiful thing is you get an amazing signing bonus. We call it eternal life. So you represent God in your business because you really work for God. And who you are, what you do, and why you do it becomes significantly changed when you begin to see yourself differently. It's about changing your perspective every time you enter into work. And you do that with 3 simple tweaks. You change your perspective from a have to a get to. You know that idea that it's Sunday afternoon and what are you thinking? I have to go face those little cretins in this classroom tomorrow morning. Not that an educator would ever feel that way, right, or would ever say that. I'm just saying there's those rare people who may have that moment flash before their minds. Or you could change that whole perspective by one word. I have to I get to. I get to pray for these kids tomorrow morning in class. I get to invest into forging new people to help shape our society for our future. I get to be like Jesus in blessing the little children that he's brought to me. See how what that does is that flips your mind from what you have to do into the privilege of what you get to do. You get to beautify landscape, God's creation. You get to bring healing to people. You get to provide food for the hungry, transportation for people. By changing The have to into a get to. Or you could change from being a hired hand to a stakeholder. You know what a hired hand is? Hired hand gets in, punches in, keeps the face down, doesn't smile, does the job. Minimum requirements to the job, by the way. Is just a stickler about every break and every lunch, and not just gets what they're owed, but tries to squeeze a little bit more out of it. They don't like what they do, and by the time they punch out, everybody's glad they're gone because there was no smiley face in the retail world that day. That's a hired hand. A stakeholder says, I got a stake in the family business. What I do reflects on the family business reputation. They punch in with a smile. Even if they don't feel it, they bring it into the moment. They treat people with respect. They go above and beyond what they have to do into what they can do. They want people to feel respect for them because they know that that respect washes over onto the family boss, God. Whether they're manning the registers or whether they're sleeping in the aisles, they're going to be helpful and friendly and kind because those virtues reflect the values of the family business, representing God in everything. Because you see, the difference is a stakeholder looks at the job as if this is God's business, not someone else's. And so I want to represent God at the moment. You can do that whether you're a plumber, a software engineer, or an executive. You just walk in saying, I'm representing God today. Or a simple little tweak could be the change from a mindset of a prison to a privilege. You know what? When you feel trapped in your job, it affects everyone around you, doesn't it? It's like a poison to your soul. It brings down your family, it brings down your friends, it brings down your coworker, because you are trapped in a place that you hate to be and you feel like you're living out a sentence, versus the privileged mindset. The privileged mindset is, you know what? I got a job. The privileged mindset says, you know, Mike talks about going to Madagascar where people are paid $1.65 a day. And the kids graduating college, single-digit percentage in getting employment when they graduate. I got a job to provide for my family's needs and to help pay my debts. The switch from prison to privilege means that you see your job from a much wider perspective than just your world. When we see only our world, it's like we're living in a circular wall, trapped on the inside. Climb over the wall. You want to know? You want confirmation that having a job is a privilege? Have a cup of coffee with a friend who doesn't have a job. He's trying to pay the bills and is worried about the mortgage and doesn't know what to do for the kids, how to make ends meet. Get refreshed in the privilege that you received. Changing your perspective can revitalize your work. And I understand, you're like, Mike, you're on a platform. You work in a church. Uh-huh. Let me give you a story from somebody who illustrates what I mean. This is Ryan Estes talking about a moment in an airport.
I will never forget that cup of coffee. Well, a couple years ago, I was traveling when my schedule worked out on Christmas Eve. I thought the airport was going to be a zoo, so I got there a couple hours early. It wasn't crowded at all, so for me, that means coffee. So I get down into my terminal D, and I see the sign, I get in line, and so it's my turn to order. And I was greeted with this very warm and sincere welcome. This woman said to me, "Hi, my name's Lily. What's your name?" I said, "I'm Ryan." She said, "Ryan, what can I make for you today?" I said, "Well, I want a grande pumpkin spice latte." She said, "You want whipped cream on that, don't you?" I said, yeah, I want the whipped cream. She said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do." She said, "I'm going to make it extra hot, load it up with whipped cream, sprinkle a little nutmeg on top. You're going to love it." I said, "Sounds great." She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Cleveland." She said, "Are you going back to Cleveland to spend the holiday with your family?" I said, "Yes." Now, at this point, I start looking around for the camera, right? I mean, I'm trying to get a latte. So I move down the line, and the conversation continues, and she's funny. She's asking me questions about my family and our holiday traditions. She's laughing, and I'm laughing, and she hands me my drink and says to me, "Ryan, have a safe trip back to Cleveland. Go create some extraordinary memories with your family. When you come back through the Minneapolis airport, I want you to stop here and tell me all about it." As I get my drink, I start walking away, and I stop and I look back at this woman, and I think to myself, you know, it's Christmas Eve. Most people would rather be anywhere else in the world than serving coffee in an airport. Not her. It was like she was meant to be there. And I couldn't help myself. I had to go back. So I did. I walked back and I said, "Excuse me, Lily." And she jumps around. "Ryan, is everything okay with the latte?" I said, "No." I said, "The latte is perfect." I just had to come back and ask you, what is your secret to making such meaningful connections over serving coffee? Well, she corrected me. She said, "Ryan, I'm not serving coffee. I'm pouring happiness into people's lives." I said, "You're pouring what?" She wants to be happy in her life. She wants to be around happy people. So she chooses, even on Christmas Eve, to smile, to have fun, to help people, to just be happy. You know, it's interesting, when I met Lily, and she would have had no way of knowing this, but I was pretty heavy in the heart and had a lot on my mind. About 3 months before that holiday, I got a call from Mom. We got some really tough medical news about Dad. And it was a terminal diagnosis, and we knew we probably weren't going to have a lot of time. So I was sitting in that airport on Christmas Eve, not in the best place in the world. I will never forget that cup of coffee.
Think about this. Lily could have had the perspective, I have to work on Christmas Eve. I don't want to do that. Lily could have said, I'm just a hired hand for a coffee shop that doesn't even care about me. I'm a prisoner, literally a prisoner in an airport. Here she is. That's Lily. That's the happiness that she's dispensing. Because you know what Lily started to think? You could tell, she just, I get to make people's travels a little bit easier. Have to get to. This Lily is a stakeholder in the business. She's improving the reputation of her company by the way that she treats the customers. She's not a prisoner. She understands the privilege she has to give people a little bit of happiness. Right? Choosing to work to find the significance and the sacred in what we do is available to you if you choose to do it. Did you hear what she said? I choose to dispense happiness. Your life with Jesus Christ is a choice Monday through Friday when you punch in. Who's the person you're going to be? Because often we're someone on church, we're someone at home, and we're someone at work, but those three don't intersect always. It's about bringing your faith into the moment, finding the sacred and the significance, considering how your work can illustrate your faith, changing the perspective you have about how to revitalize your work. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to actually time you. There's a card. It was on the seat. Take it. And I understand you may not feel prepared to do that. You don't want to do that, whatever. Just hold it, please. It makes me feel better that you even pretend to participate. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Just hold it, pretending to participate. But choosing to participate will give you the opportunity to make a step towards Jesus Christ and how you engage your life around you. For 1 minute, just stop and ask God, what do you want me to remember this week? What do you want me to do this week? Just 1 minute, that's all. Go. It's a new way of approaching life. It's not always an easy way to approach life because it's a new way of thinking. My faith group helps me with this. This is why we promote faith groups. It's so that when you're sitting in the midst of a faith group and you're struggling with your work life, which we talk about a lot, they're giving me insights about my own work life, and we're feeding back insights into theirs. We encourage everyone to join a faith group, so you can do it right in the lobby. Just go to the hub. They'll help you out. But I want to pray for you for this opportunity to represent God's business this week. God, I want to pray this morning that as you're in this place, in this room, I know that you spoke to people. I know that everyone who chose to listen and chose to think and chose to remember found something from you this morning. God, to have you fill this moment, infusing it with your Spirit, touching our lives. It's a privilege, Father, to represent you. Amen.